everything you know that you could get. Don't let them guide your life towards regret. I'll fight for what I love with every breath. My past is filled with things I won't forget. I use them all to push me to my best. So treat the worst of times just like a test. If only I could go back in time, I'd tell myself that everything will end up alright. Just push yourself, test yourself, figure out what you like, and find your limits, don't be rigid, always work towards a prime. Surround yourself with open minds, people can change your life. A few friends with intent can help you feel alive. Find a passion, take some action, and with a little time, just be patient, make a statement, try to enjoy your life. They'll try to kick you while you're down. They wanna rise up while you drown. They wanna fill your head with doubt. They're silently scared that you'll figure it out. I'll make it look like I'm losing, won't bother hiding my bruises. And when they finally think you're wounded, then it's your chance to be ruthless. They don't wanna see me care. Anytime I make some progress, I can see that they compare. I think everyone's against me, maybe something in the air. Am I paranoid? I swear a void is forming and they're scared. I walk a straight path, not many can say that. I like to play fast, cross me and there's payback. You better pray that I don't see your face at any place that I go. I know you hate that. I've been doing fine, I'm not wasting any more time. I live for the fight and the climb, and I think that the pain that's deep inside is what defines. So I won't give up, I'm gonna make it to the top. I don't care what's in my way, I swear I'm never gonna stop. I could fall flat on my face and I swear I will get back up, cause I don't deserve a thing and the road ahead is tough. They'll try to kick you while you're down. They wanna rise up while you drown. They wanna fill your head with doubt. They're silently scared that you'll figure it out. I'll make it look like I'm losing, won't bother hiding my bruises. And when they finally think you're wounded, then it's your chance to be ruthless.
Good evening, welcome one and all. Here we are again. We're going to go into what we went into last night, not the Graham Linehan part, but the part afterwards, and we're going to go a bit deeper because I kind of thought that I didn't give it the best that I could have. So just give me a second while I turn off the vertical streams going live thing. Why is it still up? Let's turn it off. Right, okay. That should be better. So yes, we should be going live on both streams. I think we're streaming away. We did fantastic numbers last night. I'd like to see it repeat, but I am definitely not holding my breath over it. We had like 700 views on the horizontal stream. That's just unprecedented. Unprecedented. Now, I have turned off adverts on both streams tonight because, well, one, this one's going to be a bit touchy, and secondly, I went to do something today and I clicked on one of my own videos on Google, and I had a 3-minute unskippable advert before it started. And, you know, I was ready to draw my own teeth at that point. Anyway, good evening, chat room. Dreadeye and Julie, Shalini, Espresso Mechanic, Lucky Charms, which is David. And that's about it in the moment. If you want to expose yourself in the chat room, feel free. They do not bite. They really don't bite. They're a lovely bunch. They're quite tame. But we don't stand any nonsense, but they are quite tame. What else have we got for you? You know the score. If you like it, like, share, subscribe. You know, once you've seen it, obviously. I wouldn't ask you to do anything until you've seen it. I'd appreciate it if sometimes someone could drop me a small donation, either at Ko-fi, that's ko-fi.com/Sergeant Grumpy, SGT Grumpy, all one word, or whatever else you want to do, like a super chat or anything. If you've got something pressing to say, super chats will take precedence over anyone else's chat if you want to ask a question. But we'll probably get to most of them, because I don't get that many questions. If you are not a subscriber and you want to chat, just subscribe, because there's no time limit. You'll be straight in there. I'm not having you hanging about. If you subscribe, you're straight in. And if you want to leave afterwards, that's up to you. If you don't like the show, why are you here? Right, let's crack on with it, shall we? So what we're going to do is we're going to go back and we're going to start working through where we were yesterday. So another deep dive into the murky waters of institutional capture and financial shenanigans. And before we crack on, I'm going to throw up the educational disclaimer, because YouTube's algorithm has all this subtlety of a smack in the mouth. So this video is for educational and investigative journalism purposes only. We're examining publicly available financial data, policy documents and published research. This is not medical advice. It's not targeting any individuals based on their identity, and it's certainly not telling anyone how to live their lives. We're investigating institutional interests, financial incentives, and policy coordination. If you can't handle evidence-based analysis without getting your knickers in a twist, there's the door. For everyone else, buckle up. Right, here we go. We talked about Graham Linehan's arrest yesterday. 5 armed officers for a social media post. Completely mental, but that arrest, just the very tip of a very expensive iceberg. And just as a matter of interest, I asked Grok to review what it thought of Graham Linehan's arrest, and it said that we had over-dramatised it and it was routine. Never in my life, high beats and tips, have I ever seen 5 armed police arrest a comedian getting off a plane and then take him in private transportation to the airport police station as a routine business. It wasn't routine, it was a show. It was a show of force. Hi Vaughn, nice to see you. And it was done deliberately. So let's crack on with the slides. Let's see what we've got. Right. Here we go. This is what we were talking about yesterday, the trans medical market growth arena. And this is just from 2023 to 2032. So we're obviously making some projections here. The red line is hormone therapy and how much one would expect to gain from that. And the blue line is from the surgery market and obviously the follow-up that comes with it. And it works out, and this is, in some respects, a best case and a worst case scenario. A worst case scenario being that more people would decide to go for a full transformation, and the best case scenario being that they're going to get as much money as they can. So $720 billion. Now remember, a billion is a million. Is it? Or is it 1,000 million? Oh, sorry, a billion is 1,000 million. It's been cheapened. The Americans cheapened it. It used to be a million, but it's 1,000 million. But you still can't get your head round it because it is an incredibly large sum. So it's going to make anything you've ever considered buying small change. It's a lot of millions. It certainly is beats and types. So let me paint a picture of what we've uncovered in our investigation. And, you know, I want you to ask questions as we go along. We'll make it interactive as we can. If anything doesn't make sense, call me out. You know, I will try and answer as best as I can, or maybe even look it up if the mood takes me. And, you know, I know when something stinks, and this whole setup absolutely reeks, and that's kind of why we're back here, because I just can't let this lie without making sure that everyone understands exactly what the hell is going on here. So, yesterday we talked about Graham Linehan getting nicked for questioning transgender ideology and for making tweets with someone he'd fallen out with and suggesting that women who felt threatened may be vindicated in, shall we say, lashing out. It wasn't a call for violence. It wasn't incitement to violence. I think it was just sensible, and some of it was said in a jokey way. And I didn't see anything really wrong with them. They looked like legal opinion, and, you know, I have had some experience in the police. Yeah. So, what we're going to concentrate today is why they went after him with such force. And the answer is, as always, money. Because it's lots and lots and lots of money. Right, so let's look at the figures. The sex reassignment surgery market alone, and this is just surgery, is projected to grow from 3.33 billion, 3.33, that's a good number, in 2023 to nearly 9 billion by 2032. That's an 11.64% compound annual growth rate. That's better than most tech stocks in the dot-com boom. And here's where it gets really crazy. Each transgender patient represents a lifetime revenue stream of approximately $500,000. It's actually 450,000, but $500,000 sounds a lot better. Well, let me say that again. 450,000 per person. That's 300k for lifelong hormones and 150k for surgeries. So if you're running a business, then just put things out your mind just now, but just say you're running a business and someone tells you that each customer is worth nearly £500,000 over the lifetime. What would you do? You'd want more customers, wouldn't you? I mean, put everything else out. That's your business. You'd want more customers. And once you start down the path as a customer, you can't back out. There's no getting away from it. You're on it forever. Now, I have in my time seen plenty of crime scenes, but I've never seen a crime scene with a $720 billion motive. And that's what we're looking at here. Potential market of everyone who identifies as a TG, we'll just call them TGs, pursues medical transition. You know, that's never going to be the case, but we're going with the best stroke worst case scenario. Now, this is where we get a little bit personal. We're just going to call out one person, but he's a CEO, so we're looking at him. John Stryker is his name. And he's... Where are we? How did we get down to John Stryker without showing any more? Oh, never mind. Anyway, so this is John Stryker. I'm going to speak to Shalini because she's offered to be my producer. I'm going to see if she can do this remotely, so that she could flip the slides on for me, so as I can actually just talk to you guys. So this is John Stryker, heir to the Stryker Corporation medical device fortune. Now, we mentioned one of his foundations yesterday. His company's worth he's worth $5.3 billion. His company makes the surgical equipment used in the procedures that one would use on a TG. And through his Arcus Foundation, which is what we spoke to yesterday, he's invested over $500 million promoting transgender activism globally. So is it just me, or does this sound like a conflict of interest? You're funding activism that creates demand for procedures that require equipment that your family company makes. Yeah? So, what about the pharmaceutical angle, you ask? Well, maybe you don't, but I'm going to tell you. Perfect. That's exactly where we're going. Let's talk about Big Pharma's wet dream. Lifelong customers who can never stop taking your product. Once they're on it, they are hooked. Even the guy on the street corner always has the risk of you giving up. But the hormone therapy market is valued at $1.6 billion in 2023, projected to hit $2.57 billion by 2030. Now, you've got to also factor in that some of that increase will be because there's an ageing population, and with the advertising that's been given to HRT, you're getting older women that are taking that up as well. So these are the products we're talking about. I keep forgetting to put the slides up. That's Arcus sales. Look how they've jumped over the last couple of years. That's a global hormone therapy market growth. This isn't working. I'm going to have to move this. I can't move it. Right. I'll need to redo it tomorrow. Don't worry. We'll carry on. And these are the kind of drugs that people are on. And once you're on them for life. That's it. You know, people like Elliot. I can't remember the surname. The actress that TG'd over to Elliot. What was her name? Ellen. Before that, I think. Or whatever. Anyway, it wasn't Ellen. Ellen you're talking about. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I've lost my train of thought there. So these are the drugs that they'll be going on to. And I'm not a doctor, but I can read financial statements. Puberty blockers alone cost $2,410 annually per patient. Now, we're talking about America because they are the biggest market by far at the moment. And that's for one medication for kids for potentially a decade. Just during puberty. And then after it, they'll be on other supplements. Now, these medications were originally approved for what they termed precocious puberty. And that's nothing to do with Epstein and his island, right? It's when kids who hit puberty too early, and it was to hold them back so as their body had a chance to grow properly, and then they could go into puberty. And for people that had prostate cancer. But they're being used off-label for gender dysphoria. Now, that means that the pharmaceutical companies can expand their market without additional regulatory oversight. Always handy, always handy. So who's making bank here? Well, this crew are. And excuse the AI, this is Grok trying to give me the four logos of these companies and failing miserably, but we've got AbbVie, Endo International, Pfizer and Novartis. And they aren't small companies. You've heard of some of them, no doubt. They're some of the biggest pharmaceutical corporations in the world, and they've found a way to create lifetime customers. I think I need to start drinking because this water's not working for me. Starting in childhood. Question for you. If I told you there's a medical condition that required lifelong medication starting in adolescence with no possibility of ever stopping treatment, and the patient had to pay for it their entire life, what would you call that? Because I'd call it perfect business model. Am I on drugs, says Beats and Tapes? No, my good man, I am not. They care nothing for people's physical and mental health. The bottom line is all that interests them. Of course it is. You're 100% correct, espresso mechanic. I shall highlight your chat for that riposte. Thank you. Right. Moving on. It's not just the drug companies either. It's all the big major hospital systems, like you've heard of them, Cedars-Sinai, Mount Sinai, well, Cedars-Sinai in LA, John Hopkins, Mount Sinai, which is the New York equivalent, and University of Michigan. They're bringing in over 100 million in revenue from transgender surgeries. These are specialised gender clinics, purpose-built profit centres. That's really all they are. Now, this is what gets me. The surgical complications that are created as part of this are additional revenue streams. Revision surgeries, ongoing medical management, treatment of side effects. It's like selling someone a car that's guaranteed to break down. You're never away from the garage. And, you know, I can't imagine what it's like to take the decision to go down this route and then to undergo physical transformation. But you see the results on Twitter and other places where people are either regretting their choices or moaning about things like smell and other very unpleasant occurrences that they really didn't think they were going to get. I don't know what they actually thought they were going to get. This, you talk about mis-selling people, you know, finance deals. This sounds like somebody's been mis-sold quite dramatically here. So, are we saying doctors are deliberately harming patients for money? No, we're not saying that. And we're definitely not saying that about individual doctors. But what I'm saying is that the system incentivizes certain outcomes. And when surgeons are paid on relative value units that reward complex, high-revenue procedures, what do you think happens? You know, if you were a cop and you got paid per speeder you clocked, which many people think they do, but they don't, I can assure you. But if you get paid depending on how many people you could bring in, and on a sliding scale, you'd be going for either quantity or quality, and you'd be at it 8 hours of a day. You wouldn't give any quarter, would you? So think back to another thing that hospitals were incentivized to do recently. Maybe you know what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to say it. Now, let's go into it gets a little bit darker here, because we need to talk about who's being targeted and why. And so what we're actually looking at here is demographics. And I'm going to have to fix these colours as well because they don't show up well, do they? But the demographics over time show that in the 1980s to the 1990s, the majority of people, which is the bottom section that you can't actually see, well, you get the idea, but the bottom section were adult males that were looking to transition. The small pink section was adolescents, and the bit at the top, which is green, were others. And by the time we get to 2020, 25, it's gone completely the other way. It's all adolescents, and adult males have dropped to less than the adolescents. And the unfortunate thing is most of those adolescents now are females. And that's a complete flip. 70% now of the people that are wanting to transition are adolescent females. What happened? Did biology change? Did male brains suddenly become female? What's going on? What's happened? Or is something else going on? European birth rates across the board, every single Western European country is below what one's this? Yeah, is below replacement level. So every single Western European country is below replacement level. Spain's at 1.19, Italy's at 1.25. Even France, which has pro-family policies, is only at 1.84. You need 2.1 to maintain population. Most European populations hit their current level more than a decade ago. So what's turning people away from either having children or being fertile? Could it be things like microplastics, estrogen in the water? Are we turning the frogs gay? I don't know. Fluoride. It could be a multitude of things. But one thing that we almost certainly are, the money starts to point towards is the change in young females, young adolescent females. And this is, things do get a little bit controversial here because there are studies on both sides that try and put forward their case. But you have to ask these uncomfortable questions in order to try and see where we're going. Why is this massive increase in young women seeking procedures that will, and let's remember, that will permanently sterilise them? And they're doing it exactly at the same time that Western birth rates are collapsing. Because if we go back to that figure, Western birth rates are collapsing. There's the the red one here is the EU, the US, the one below it's the blue, is the EU birth rate. And up here we have medical expansions and funding is this grey line. So the question is, what exactly is going on? So cross-sex hormones render patients permanently infertile. Surgical procedures do the same thing. So we're talking about voluntary sterilisation. And these programs appear to be targeting the most fertile demographic, teenage girls, during a fertility crisis. So it does seem that we are doubling down. I mean, Espresso Mechanic in the chat says E-numbers and other additives in food. That could be part of it as well. And Chris is saying that EM and Red 40 has been linked to hormonal imbalances. All valid things that could be affecting this. But the really dark thing is the amount of funding that's going into driving programs. And we'll carry on to continue into that. It sounds a bit like a conspiracy theory, but I mean, you know me, I really don't do conspiracy theories unless I've got compelling evidence. So what I've done here is I've followed the money and the data. And yeah, okay, correlation doesn't prove causation, but when you couple it with money and then patterns that are repeated decade after decade, you start to get the idea that people are deliberately targeting adolescent females for sterilizing during a demographic crisis. And that's what it looks like. I'm only calling out the data. I'm not telling you what's happening. I'm just saying that's what it looks like. And many European countries appear to have reached their current population level decades ago. I'm going too early. So, sorry. Some over a century ago, they reached their high spot when it came to population. So we're looking at systematic depopulation across the Western world. And that necessitates mass migration for economic sustainability. So what people are thinking is if you get people in to replace the people that we're not having, then, you know, we can maintain our economic stability. But that's not how it works, is it? Because we discussed this last night and the night before. Because even the Fabian Society pointed out that diversity causes a breakdown in social cohesion, a breakdown in community, and increases crime rates. So it's not going to work doing this. Would actually be better taking a hit and slowing our economy down so that everyone that's still here has something to do and is a contributor to that economy rather than trying to continually push forward. And we're now getting into, well, we're digressing into economic theory here, but sometimes, maybe just sometimes, what you've got is good enough. And pushing forward is the straw that breaks you. It could be. It could be. So, there is this phenomenon that has been described as rapid onset gender dysphoria. And there's a bit of controversy about this. Some people are saying it's been discredited, other people are still sticking with it. So what you have is kids, mostly girls, and there's no history of gender issues suddenly identifying as transgender. So out of nowhere, they come up with they want to be a boy. And it often appears in clusters within friend groups. Social media consumption seems to spike before identification, and parents report massive personality changes. Now, I've seen a little bit of this. I mean, my daughter's at college just now. She started when she was 16. And some of her friends, well, one of her friends is a girl who's a boy. The other friend is a boy who's a girl. And the third one just appears to be confused. It's like, you know what? It's crazy. It's crazy. But thankfully, everything's on the straight and narrow on this road. It does sound like something out of Videodrome, mate. You're right. Videodrome's quite a good movie as well. Should maybe go back. Fluffy Columbus says social contagion. Social contagion's a contentious word as well, isn't it? I don't think we're allowed to use that kind of terminology these days, Fluffy. But I'm not 100. Let's say we're on the same page. Yeah. And you never saw kids like this before Beats and Tapes, did you? You never saw it. But suddenly these kids appear. And yet, all through school, all the girls were like, you know, wearing princess dresses and girly and everything. And then suddenly, boom, you know, I want to be a boy. And it's like, ah. And when you look at it, look at the age of that it comes on, it's always at the start of puberty. And for females, it's always early puberty. And then it tails off. Boys, it works the opposite way. Well, not the opposite way. It comes in slightly later, but boys do develop slightly later, especially when it comes to maturity. And Shalini says when she was at school, there was no autism, ADHD or any. Well, yeah, there wasn't, because it wasn't put up with. That's the thing. You either, if you were that way inclined, or if, and I'm not saying it didn't exist, but you either learn to keep your mouth shut and put up with it, or you're going to beat out you. Yeah. So, moving on. Actually, that's in my script, social contagion. So if this was happening with any other condition, kids suddenly developing the same symptoms and clusters after social media exposure, what would we call it? Social contagion. You're right, Fluffy. Mass hysteria? But apparently we're not allowed to ask those kind of questions about this topic. And I mean, that then goes back to, I mean, there are other things to consider as well, which I was listening to this guy from Harvard Business School of all places, but what he's given it is, we need to be bored more, because at the moment your senses are assaulted 24/7, and when they're not being assaulted, you assault them yourself by picking up your phone. I mean, you take your phone to the toilet. You're always in communication. You know what's happening every minute of every day. You wake up, you look at that small screen. You go to bed, you look at that small screen, and then go to sleep. So you don't have the opportunity to be bored. And it's when you are bored that you think about the big questions in life. And when I think back to when I was growing up, especially as a teenager, you had plenty of opportunity to be bored because there was no distractions. So, you know, you would go out and you'd be out playing or whatever, and there are times you're just going to be walking. And you're just walking and there's no distractions. And you think about things, and you think about the big issues of life. Even as a child, you're starting to think about existential issues. And that gets quite deep. But you need that. You need to be able to work these things out in your head, or you're just going to continue avoiding it. And then you're going to become a child permanently. And this is part of the things I'm seeing when I look at people in their 30s, and even nowadays up to their 40s. I mean, some woman I said the other day, she tweeted that this guy, they were at the zoo, and the guy was moaning about when were they going back because he wanted to play his video game. And they'd been there 30 minutes. And he was there with kids. See, that woman's got 3 kids, not a husband and 2. She's got 3 kids. These aren't men. Men don't behave like that. It's crazy. Oh, tomboys, Chris. That's tomboys were everywhere. I mean, did anyone read Enid Blyton growing up? What was George? What was George? Yeah, George and Timmy, you know? It's just, you've got to give people time to work out where they are in the world, where they are in life, where they are in the universe. And that's the problem we're not doing now. Instead of giving people time to work out where they are in the universe, we're throwing the universe at them. And you can't take that as an adult, never mind as a child. So of course things are going to break. And I think that might have something to do with it. I'm kind of coming up with this on the fly here. This isn't in the script. But why aren't parents stopping it, they say? Well, it's a good question, because that leads us directly to our next section. And parents aren't stopping it because our institutions have been captured, and this is part of what we did go through. Yeah, and Enid Blyton is considered far right now. This is what we went through last night. You don't implement a $720 billion transformation without controlling the levers of power. I just want to check that the vertical stream is indeed streaming. It is, but oh, there's an interesting point. It's got almost no viewers. That is very interesting. And I'll tell you why. Because I turned off adverts on it, didn't I? I'm guaranteed that's what the case is. Anyway, you don't implement a $720 billion transformation without controlling the levers of power. So let's look at it. Let's look at this web. Here we have the Transgender Industry Funding Network, and there's Arcos Foundation at the top left. And you can see the money flows out of them and into other places and comes back from other places and back to them. It's one big interwoven group of institutions. The money flowing out, the information coming back, and then the money coming back as these people take them up on it. All coordinated, all pushing the same message. It's classic institutional capture, isn't it? You don't need to convince everyone. You just need to control the institutions that make the decisions. Medical associations, educational boards, legal frameworks, government agencies. That's all you've got to do. You've just got to capture them. You know, look at a hospital. This is an American hospital, and that the things grouped around it, all those boxes grouped around it, are institutions and government departments and quangos or whatever that have some level of control or regulation over what goes on in that hospital. And I would imagine most Western hospitals are much the same. Possibly slightly less complex than that one, but much the same. It is indeed classical institutional capture. Our schools have been captured and our churches have been captured. And when we look at that schools implementing gender ideology without parental consent, without even telling parents these days. Kids are being socially transitioned. New names, pronouns, sometimes even coming back as identifying as cats or foxes, different bathroom usages. Parents aren't being told. In some jurisdictions, parents who object can lose custody of their children. And this is the state overreaching. And as Chris says, the day Tavistock shut down, something like 6 others opened. So this is what really gets me, because, you know, I joined the police to try and do good, you know, to try and not change the world, but to be a force for good. And I spent 20 odd years doing that, and now we have government institutions deliberately undermining parental authority. They're positioning parents as obstacles to their children's authentic identities. It is systematic family destruction. That's exactly what I was saying, Shalini. The people lose their kids. Yeah. It's not just families. Religious institutions face legal liabilities for maintaining traditional teachings about gender. Churches, synagogues, even mosques. They're all being neutralised as sources of cultural authority. It is the classic revolutionary transformation pattern. You identify cultural fault lines and exploit them. Gender ideology attacks the most fundamental human categories, male and female, and completely undermines social organisation. And you wonder, how can it be legal? Well, if you have captured the institutions, you control the institutions that define what's legal. You can make anything legal or illegal. That's where we end up back at Graham, doesn't it? Comedy writer gets 5 armed officers for social media posts. Not because he threatened anyone, not because he committed violence, but because he questioned the ideology. And that's the level of enforcement we're seeing. And we've seen this take place over the last nearly 5 years now. You cannot question the ideology or you get censored. And now we're getting censored and arrested. I have literally arrested child offenders with less police presence than took out Graham Linehan. There's just no need for that. A comedian questioning gender ideology gets terrorism level response where actual criminals are walking free. So what about actual medical evidence? And, as always, there are 2 sides to every story, because some studies will say this and other studies will say that. But on balance, the CAS review of the, and this was the UK's comprehensive analysis of gender medicine for children, concluded that evidence base was remarkably weak and operating on shaky foundations. They said puberty blockers didn't improve mental health outcomes, and in fact 34% of children experienced deteriorated mental health, while only 29% improved. The medications also have adverse effects on bone density problems, growth suppression, and potential cognitive effects. So if you were told there's a medication that made kids worse rather than better, would you give it to your children? Because that's kind of what we're doing. And we're charging their parents $2,400 a year for the privilege. And then there's detransition. Official rates claim it's around 1%, but more recent studies suggest 2 to 10%, while some showing 13% reporting a history of detransition. The methodology of these studies is sketchy at best, so we're not getting a true representation. People aren't taking the time to really dig into this because it doesn't support the ideology and the narrative. Surgical complications that we talked about earlier are common. Revision procedures are frequently needed. Most of these surgeries are, in effect, experimental, and they're being performed on healthy people, often on children, and with limited long-term outcome data. That sounds familiar again. So if you were evaluating this evidence, would it pass muster in a magistrate's course? Never mind as a medical treatment for kids, but questioning it and you get arrested. Yeah, Chris says D-trans also report they feel loveless too, wiped of any love. Yeah. I mean, we're not saying that some people might genuinely need to go down this route. That might well be the case. But people in the midst of puberty are not equipped to make these decisions. You can't drink until you're 18 in this country. But you can convince a doctor that you may need surgery? Really? Well, I think as Shalini says, the whole thing is a scam and people are literally being sacrificed. Yeah, well, It's more than a scam, Shalini. It's a very profitable business. And until that business model is disrupted, it's unlikely to fail. So why am I, of all, convinced that this is coordinated rather than organic? And all we need to do is look at the timeline of policy implementation across different countries. Because if we look at trans rights timeline, Argentina 2007, then Malta 2012, then Ireland 2015. They all implement virtually identical policies despite completely different healthcare systems, different cultures, different legal frameworks. That doesn't speak of coincidence. That speaks of coordination, doesn't it? And the same foundations that are funding transgender activism in the US are funding it in Europe, like we pointed out last night. They're funding it in Europe, Australia, Canada. Their big market they want to break into is the Far East, because that's a huge market. Over 400 million annually in coordinated international funding. It is a global organisation, a global operation. Doesn't happen as much in Japan, Shalini, no, because it's a very, very different society. And your parents have a lot more control over you than you would in a Western society. But remember, we spoke about Russia, who are funding the opposite. They're doing the anti-gender funding, but they spent 186 million over 10 years. So they're the other side, the bad guys, if you will, aren't able to put in as much money as these huge American corporations. Soros being one of them. It shows the same patterns as you would if you were identifying criminal networks. Central coordination, local implementation, shared resources, common objectives. You'd look at the drug dealers in South America, the same pattern. It's a criminal organisation. And very similar suppression techniques, academic censorship, deplatform, legal intimidation. Researchers who publish contrary findings lose their jobs. Books get banned. Counter evidence gets systematically eliminated. History gets rewritten. And we know this happens because we've seen it happen. Until someone comes along and can prove something without a doubt, and suddenly everything has to reverse. And this is how we know that this is not legitimate science, because real science welcomes scrutiny. It encourages debate. And it changes based on evidence. But this ideology, this business-driven mentality, demands compliance and punishes questions. So where does all this lead? Yeah. Western fertility rates continue declining. There's a fertility rate along the bottom of the graph. Yeah. European population replacement through immigration accelerates. That would be the red line. Traditional family structures continue breaking down. The grey line. And our religious institutions continue being neutralised. Meanwhile, you create permanent medical patients requiring lifelong treatment, expanded healthcare bureaucracies, and professional activist classes, all dependent on maintaining the current system. This is about more than transgender rights. This is about fundamental transformation of Western civilization, demographic transformation, economic dependency, cultural revolution, political control. This is a very attack at the core of our being. This is an attack on everything that you stand for. And government authority isn't helping you here. They're expanding their authority over family decisions. They're making medical choices for you. They're supplying the educational content. They're removing your ability to practice religion freely. And traditional sources of social authority are getting systematically dismantled. I've never seen a threat like this before. It is all coming together in a perfect storm. And it's not coming necessarily all from outside our borders. It's being implemented by our own institutions. And don't think this is just the Labour Party, because this has been going on for much longer than the last year. This is endemic in this country at the highest levels because of what we talked about yesterday and today, where the funding from the US has captured our institutions. We are under severe and imminent threat. There is hope. We have seen some light. The UK has banned puberty blockers. Sweden, Finland and Norway have implemented restrictions. Public opinion is shifting as people begin to wake up to what's happening. Maybe Lineman's arrest was a mistake. Maybe it showed their hand too early, revealed the level of enforcement that they're willing to use. Because people are starting to ask why a comedian gets terrorism level policing for social media posts. And people are making memes and jokes, and that's always an indicator that the public don't like it. The evidence is overwhelming. It's not a grassroots civil rights movement. It's a $720 billion industry serving convergent financial and ideological interests with the objective of fundamentally transforming Western civilization for profit. That's what it's for. It is purely for profit. You don't need a secret cabal when you have multinational corporations wielding massive amounts of money, just intent on making more of it at your expense. We have the financial conflicts of interest. We have the systematic targeting of fertile young women during a demographic crisis. We have the institutional capture. We have the suppression of opposition. And we have the international coordination. The only thing I can ask you to do is to protect your family, your families, your children, your communities from this systematic deception and tell people what's going on. They may not believe you, they may look at you as a kook, but at least then you have tried. I'll be putting this information and sources to most of the information where I gathered all this up on Sergeant Grumpy. And no doubt we'll come back to this at some other point. But I'd like to thank you all for tuning in tonight. It's been quite an intense one, this, I think. And I think we'll leave it there. We've nearly done an hour. So just to finish off, share the information, ask questions, demand accountability, because when billions in profit and civilizational transformations are at stake, they will arrest comedians to maintain control, but they cannot arrest us all. And that's it with that. I'm sure it's been great for you